Hello guys, welcome to the Python series on LearnIn. My name is Nse. In this video, we are going to talk about two different data types, tuples and sets. Tuples are ordered collections of different elements, just like a list. However, tuples are immutable, meaning that they cannot be modified after being created. Remember that while talking about lists, we saw that lists can be modified after they have been created, where we carried out some operations that modified the list. Operations like sort, reverse, append, etc. The link to this video is in the description if you would want to take a look. I had to take us back to lists because tuples are like lists, except that tuples are immutable. You could see tuples as immutable lists. This means that methods that mutate cannot be used with tuples. Methods like insert, reverse, append, sort, pop, etc. Tuples are commonly used for situations where you want to group related data together and you don't intend to modify the data within the tuple. Let's head over to VS Code and write some code. The basic syntax of tuple is like so. You simply have elements wrapped with parentheses like we have here 1, 2 and 3, and in this case we are storing this tuple in a variable called my num. A tuple can be empty, in which case you would have empty sets of parentheses like this. You would hardly need an empty tuples though. This is because tuples are immutable. So an empty tuple will always stay empty. You cannot modify it. So we have my num set to 1, 2, 3 enclosed in parentheses, and we also have empty tuple set to this empty parenthesis, and then we are printing the type of my num and printing the type of empty tuple. This is just to show us that my num is a tuple as well as empty tuple. Now let's run this code and see what is returned. If you look here in the terminal, you're going to notice that we have tuple in both cases. So you can have tuple written like this, and you can also have an empty tuple. Note that when creating a tuple with a single element, the syntax can either be the single element with a trailing comma like we have here. Num is a variable set to a tuple that contains a single element. This is how to write it. You could also have it written in this way with parentheses, and then you have the single element enclosed within the parentheses, and then you end with a trailing comma. Now let's print the type of book. Notice that book is the variable that holds this single element tuple wrapped in parentheses, and let's also print num. Num is the variable that holds this single tuple written without parentheses. If we run this, you're going to notice that we have the type of tuple returned in both cases. So this proves that this is a tuple and also that this is a tuple as well. Just an aside, in case you are wondering, I changed my VS Code theme using an extension called Cuts. If you are interested in this, simply click on the extensions icon. This here is the extensions icon, and then up here in the set bar, type CODS, and you'd have this Cuts, one with theme emit. Click on it and then click on install. I have uninstalled because I already have it installed. So if I click on uninstall, it's going to go back to install. Then I click on install and it's installing. So I have it installed now. And then come here after I've installed it. Up here, click on Cut, and then you can come back to clicking on the file explorer icon, and then you can exit the extensions page. This has nothing to do with Python, but everything to do with the look and feel of my VS Code. That being said, let's go back to talking about tuples. Now let's take a look at some operations that can be performed with tuples. Though tuples are immutable, there are some operations that are possible. Note that these operations do not modify the tuple. Let's take a look at some common operations with tuple. We have the len function. Len function is going to show the number of elements in a tuple. For example, we have this tuple called my num, and we have this len function. The len function wrapping my num. My num is the variable that holds this tuple. Now let's run this code and see what it comes to. Notice that we have 3 returned to us here on the terminal. That is because the length of this tuple is 3. If we add more values, it's 9, 0, 2. Let's save and let's run this code. Now notice that we have 7 returned. That's basically what the len function does. It shows the number of elements in a tuple. Now you should note that tuples are indexed. So elements in a tuple can be accessed using their index. Let's work with my num tuple still, and let's try to access the element at index 1, and we are printing it to the terminal with this print function. Now let's run this code. We have 2 returned because 2 is the element on index of 1 within this tuple. If we print my num at index of 0, let's save and run this code. We have 1 returned because considering this tuple, the value at index of 0 is 1. Remember that indexing counts from 0, so we are going to have 0, 1, and 2. So in this case, 1 is at index 0, 2 is at index 1, and 3 is at index 2. So if we were to print the element at index 2, let's run this code. Notice that we have 3 returned. So the syntax is simply, you have the name of the variable, my num, you have square brackets, and within the square brackets, you have the index. And you could decide to store it in a variable like so. And instead of printing it directly, then you'd rather print the variable, which is set index. Let's save. I'll clear this terminal and then I'll run the code. And we have 3 returned. So printing it directly and printing it in a variable will give the same output. We could also slice a tuple, which means that we would have a syntax that looks like this. I'm going to bring this out of the print function and I'll create a variable. I'll call it sliced tuple and I'll have it store the output of slicing this tuple, and then we would print sliced tuple. So let's still work with my num variable. While slicing a tuple, remember how slice works. You would have the name of the variable and then you'd have square brackets and you have numbers in the square brackets. In this case, we have 2 numbers, 0 and 2. So we are simply saying from index 0, slice up to 2. Now remember that while slicing, the last index provided within the square brackets is exclusive. So that means that that last index is not considered in the sliced output. Now, if you find any of this confusing, you may want to refer to the video on slicing. I have provided the link in the description. Now let's run this code and see what happens. We have 1 and 2. So that's because we are slicing from 0. 1 is at index 0 and we are taking to 2. So that means that we would stop right before index 2. So 3 is at index 2. That means we are stopping right before 3. That's why we have 1 and 2 returned. Now we can also count the number of times an element occurs in a tuple. Let's work with my num. This is the tuple that we're using in this example. And let me create a space here. We want to check the number of times that 5 occurs within this tuple. Let's run this code. We have 0 returned. That is because we do not even have 5 within this tuple. But let's check the number of times that 2 occurs. Let's run this code. We have 1. That's because 2 occurs 1 within this tuple. If we were to have another 2, let's save and run this code. Notice that now we have 2 returned to us. So count basically shows the number of times that an element occurs. Just before we wrap up tuples, let's take a look at some of the methods that cannot be used with tuple. Let's work with my num tuple still, and let's have my num dot append. Let's try and append 5 to my num, and let's print my num after appending 5. Let's run this code and see what happens. Now notice that we have an attribute error saying tuple object has no attribute append. We have this error because tuples are immutable. Appending new elements to an existing tuple would be trying to modify it. And remember that immutable means that it cannot be modified. So that is why we have this attribute error. In Python, an attribute error occurs when you try to access an attribute or method that doesn't exist or cannot be accessed in the context you are using it. In this example, this method append cannot be accessed in the context that we are using it. Remember, we are trying to append to a tuple, and tuples are immutable. Tuples cannot be modified. So this attribute error shows that this method cannot work on tuple. The same thing would happen if we tried to use any other method that would end up modifying, like reverse. Let's have my norm dot reverse. Let's comment out this so that we are sure that the error is not from there. Now I'm going to clear the terminal. I'll save and let's run this code. We have attribute error. The exact same thing. Tuple object has no attribute reverse. So this is just to further prove to us that any method that will end up trying to modify an existing tuple will not work. Now let's talk about sets. Sets are unordered collections with no duplicates. Every element in a set has to be unique. That means that sets does not accept repetitions. You cannot have the same element more than once in a set. Sets can only contain immutable elements. This means that you cannot have lists or dictionaries in a set. Remember that lists are mutable, dictionaries are also mutable. Let's head over to VS Code and write some code. So the basic syntax is curly braces. You have curly braces, and then within the curly braces you list elements and you separate them with commas. So basically curly braces with values separated by comma, like we have in the case of num sets, like we have in the case of strings, and like we have in the case of mixed sets. I prefer to have all my variables in lowercase letters, so I'll simply replace this with lowercase. This is a set, this is a set, and this is a set. This first set contains integers, this second set contains strings, and the third set is a mix of elements from different data types. We have an integer here, we have another integer, true is of Boolean data type, and then book is a string. We can print the type of each of these variables. We have num set, and I'm simply going to repeat this 2 more times, and I'll change this to strings because that's the name of the variable we are considering, and I'll change this to mixed set. And let's run this code and see what happens. Notice that here on the terminal we have sets in all cases. So num set, this is a set, strings here, this is a set, mixed set, this is a set. A set can be empty. Note, however, that an empty set is not a pair of curly braces. That would be a dictionary. An empty set is written like so. I'm going to comment this out. An empty set is written like so. You simply have set with parentheses, and Python will understand that this is an empty set. If we were to print the type of empty set, let's run this code and notice that we have set returned to us. So if you have your code written like this, set with empty parentheses, Python understands that this is an empty set. However, if you have empty curly braces like this, that would be a dictionary. We have not talked about dictionary yet, but we will talk about dictionary in the very next lesson. Meanwhile, let's run this code and see what comes out. Notice that while this on line 10 is a set, this on line 14 is a dictionary. Now let's look at some operations with set. With set, you can have the add method. Add method will take a single argument and it will add that argument to the set. I'm going to uncomment this whole code, and we have our set here, the num set. The num set contains 5 values, and we want to use the add method on the num set. So that's why we have here on line 27 num set dot add, and the element that we want to add is 20. Now let's run this code. Note that sets are unordered, so the order does not really matter with sets. 20 has been inserted here in the updated set printed here on the terminal. We have 20 added. Now remember that set does not accept duplicate values. Let's try to add 20 again to this set. Let's save and let's run this code. Notice that we have the exact same set returned to us with single value of 20. We do not have 20 occurring more than once in this set, even though we made an attempt to add it more than once. This is what happens when you try to add an element more than once to a set. Because sets do not take duplicates, set will not take in that value because the value already exists. So that is why we have the exact same set as we had here returned to us after the second attempt at adding 20. I hope that you get the point. Now let's take a look at the len method. Len method will return the number of elements in a set, just like it would with a list, tuples, and now in set. We have our set, we call it num set, and we want to print the length of num set. The length of num set is stored in this variable called set length. So that's why we're printing set length. Let's run this code and see what happens. Notice that we have 5 returned to us. That's because the number of elements within this set is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember that length is different from index. Length counts from 1, index counts from 0. Now we can also remove an element from a set using the remove method. The remove method would remove an element from a set and it will return no output to you. Let's see an example. In this set we have some values. Let's call the remove method on this num set. We're still working with num set and we want to remove 10. Let's save and let's run this code. Nothing is returned to us. That's exactly how the remove method works. It will remove an element from a set and it will not return any output. However, if we print the set after remove method has been called, let's see what happens. Notice that we have the set returned and 10 is not included. This shows that 10 has been removed from the set. Let's have num set dot remove and let's remove 3. Let's save and let's run this code. Now notice that the set returned to us does not have 3 anymore. So we have removed 3 and we have removed 10. That's why we are left with 1249, exactly as we have on the terminal here. We can also call the clear method on a set, and this will empty out the whole set. Let's bring back a num set and let's have num set.clear. After that, let's print num set so that we would see what is left of num set after the clear method is called. Now let's save and run this code. Notice that we have an empty set returned to us. We have cleared out all the elements in this set using the clear method. While working with two sets, we can return a new set with numbers common to the left and the right set by finding the intersection of the two sets. This intersection is denoted by ampersand. Now let's see an example. We have two sets here. We have Dave and we have data, and then we want to print the intersection of these two sets. Remember, just the way that you know set in mathematics, intersection is going to show the elements that are common to the sets considered. In this case, we're considering the Dave set and we're considering the data set. So intersection will return to us values that are present in these two sets. Now let's run this code and see what happens. We have Python and SQL returned. That's because in Dave we have Python and SQL. In data we have Python and SQL. We do not have Java in data. We do not have C in data. But we do not have Excel in Dave, and we do not have R in Dave. The only two common elements are Python and SQL. That's why we have Python and SQL returned. I hope that that's clear. Now we can also find the union of two sets. The union returns a new set that has all members of both sets combined. Remember that in math, if you're calculating the union of two sets, it's going to be all the elements of those two sets combined. So that's what we have here, and union is denoted with this pipe character. The pipe character is on the / key of my keyboard. You get it by combining shift and the / key. Now we're still working with our two sets, Dave and data, and we want to return Dave union data. We have this pipe symbol. So now let's run this code and see what happens. Notice that we have returned to us all the elements that are present in these two sets. We have, without repetitions, we have Java 1, C2, Python 3, SQL 4, Excel 5, and R 6. So we have those 6 elements returned to us here. We have C, Python, Java, SQL, R, and Excel. That's how union works. We could quickly see another example. Maybe we can have X equal to 4, 5, 6, and then we can have Y equal to 8, 9, and 10, and we can print X union Y. Let's save and let's run this code. Notice that we have all these elements combined into one set and returned to us. So we have 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, and 10. I hope that you get the point. You can find the difference of two sets. Difference will return a new set with values in the left side that are not in the right side, denoted by the minus sign. So we have these two sets, dev and data, and I'm going to comment line 126 out first. Now we want the difference between dev and data. In that case, we would have dev on the left side and data on the right side, and then would have the minus sign in between. And what this is going to return would be values in dev that are not contained in data. Now let's run this code and see what happens. We have Java and C. That's because Java and C are the two elements in dev that are not contained in data set. Here, the order of writing the operation really matters because it is a set with the values in the left side that are not in the right side that is returned. I hope that's clear. So now let's kind of swap this. So we now have data on the left side and dev on the right side. Now let's run this code. Notice that we have R and Excel returned. So in this case, the data set is considered because data is on the left, and then Python checks to see which elements are on this left side that are not contained in the right set. In this case, the right set is dev, and so we have R and Excel returned. That's because in dev we do not have R and we do not have Excel. Let's do the same thing with these two sets, X and Y. Let's print X minus Y. I'll clear the terminal. In this case, X is on the left and Y is on the right. So Python is going to check the elements in X that are not in Y. So we have 4, 5, 6 returned to us because in Y we do not have 4, we do not have 5, we do not have 6. So these elements in X, which is the left side, that are not contained in Y, ends up being all the elements in X. Now I'm going to include 10 before I swap positions. So I'd have print Y minus X. I need to comment this out. So now Y is on the left and X is on the right. So Python is going to consider set Y and then check X to see the values which are not contained in Y. Let's run this code. So we have 8 and 9 returned because 8 and 9 are not contained in X. I really hope that you get the point. That's it for today. If you have any questions or comments, please say them in the comment section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Learn In. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one. And if you would like a copy of this source code, I have provided the link in the description.